Hello, my little chickadees, and welcome to the Card Combo Show with me, Chocobilly, where I look at the whimsical and weird combos in the Final Fantasy TCG. This week, I'm going to be looking at a lot of OPUS 13 cards. Starters with the meaty stuff: Ovelia, Cid Randell, Scarmiglione, Lightning, and Rubicante. Right, Ovelia, wow, what a card. So she is a 3 CP backup with the ability of when a category FFT forward you control is put from the field into the break zone, draw one card. This effect will trigger only once per turn. And the S ability Aegis, which is an S and dull, choose one forward you control. Until the end of the turn it gains haste, and when this forward is put from the field into the break zone, play this forward from the break zone onto the field dull. So this card is just, that S ability is fantastic. It's so good. There's so many applications for it as well. I mean, the draw a card from the FFT forward put into the break zone ability is nice as well, fits nicely into an FFT deck, but that Aegis S ability, wow. She's a princess as well, which is awesome, works well in knight decks still. So first and foremost, Ramza. So he's an EX burst. When Ramza enters field, choose one category FFT character other than card name Ramza in your break zone, add it to your hand. It's an FFT character, so you can get back the Ovelias that you will have used for her S ability, which is great. Also, if you don't have Ovelia on the field and she's happened to be in your break zone through mill or something like that, and you are at damage 5, you can Ramza to get her from your break zone and then play her immediately onto the field as well. But there are some better applications for this. Obviously, when Ramza leaves the field with Ovelia on the field, you would draw a card, but if you use her S on him, he would then re-enter, and he would have drawn you a card from Ovelia, but then also gets to get your card back to hand from his entry ability, and if you're at damage 5, play an FFT character onto the field as well. So there's lots of fun to be had with this, but there's ways to kind of keep this engine rolling. Enter Death Machine. I tried to work this card in any way I can. Its text isn't quite as stated here, so it says, each turn at the beginning of main phase 1, if neither player controls forwards, put Death Machine into the break zone. At the end of your turn, choose one forward your opponent controls, break it. At the end of your opponent's turn, select one forward you control, put it into the break zone. So what Death Machine's text should actually read is at each turn at the beginning of main phase 1, if either player controls no forwards, put Death Machine to the break zone. Basically means if either player doesn't have a forward, it dies. That way it just doesn't just stay there for the entire game and just keeps on eating people's forwards. So yeah, at the end of your opponent's turn, select one forward you control, put it into the break zone. So say your opponent goes to end their turn, you say, just before you end your turn, I'm going to use Ovelia's S ability on Ramza. And then they end their turn, Death Machine triggers, you then put Ramza into the break zone. You draw yourself a card, provided no other FFT, is it characters or forwards? Forwards have been put into the break zone this turn. You get a card off of that. Then Ovelia's trigger will happen for Ramza. Ramza will come back into the field. He can then get you a FFT character, say the Ovelia that you just used on Ramza, and then if you're at damage 5, you can play something onto the field as well. And you can do this every turn on your opponent's turn, provided they don't have a means of killing Ramza before Death Machine does. Now obviously this does mean that Death Machine every turn will be killing Ramza, and really you're going to always want an Ovelia in hand for that trigger. But if every turn you're able to get Death Machine to just eat one of your opponent's forwards, and then at the end of their turn, you can then use the Ovelia S on Ramza and use Death Machine to kill him and then get him back to hand. Get him back onto the field to then get the Ovelia back to hand. That's just a fantastic way of just keep on refunding that Ovelia and having Death Machine there constantly every turn eat one of your opponent's forwards. Gilgamesh. So what makes Ovelia's S fantastic is not only the fact that it's a re-entry ability, a flicker effect, but it's the fact it gains haste as well. So you can play Gilgamesh onto the field, use Ovelia's S, and then you can just attack with Gilgamesh if you wanted, or you could use his dull ability to search one card named Enkidu and play it onto the field dull, so you get something to hand. Then you can put Gilgamesh into the break zone, break one of your opponent's forwards, Gilgamesh will come back into the field, and then you can use his put into the break zone again to break another forward, so you can effectively get an attack and 2 breaks off, which is really good. Kefka. So, Dull, choose one forward your opponent controls. It gains plus 5,000 power until the end of the turn. At the end of the turn, break it. I think these two cards are going to get played together a lot, because Kefka, just like with Death Machine, will break something at the end of the turn, and you know that if you use Ovelia's S on it, so you can place something onto the field. Use Ovelia's S to give it haste, use Kefka to give it plus 5,000 power. It attacks your opponent. If they block it, it's probably going to die. If they don't block it, you get up a point damage through, and then at the end of the turn, Kefka will break it, it will then re-enter, and if it's got an entry effect, that's great. If it's an FFT character, then you get a card back from Ovelia, so there's loads of good things that can be done with these two. I think Kefka is going to be a card that we see a lot more of. Shantoto. So when Shantoto is dealt damage, deal the same amount of damage to all forwards other than Shantoto. If a forward damaged by its ability is put from the field into the break zone, remove from the game instead. So the reason I say this card is because it's whenever you use this card, you want to wipe your opponent's field, but you always have to be careful that you don't break your own Shantoto. But you don't have to worry about that anymore, because you can use Ovelia's S on Shantoto, and then you can just deal Shantoto 20k through Une's S ability if you want. That will completely wipe everyone's field, but then Ovelia's ability will trigger to bring Shantoto back into the field. I keep saying Ovelia's ability trigger, sorry, I mean the S that she's bestowed upon Shantoto will trigger. And then Shantoto will come back into the field. It does come back in Dull, but you know, if it's a board wipe and you did a 20k board wipe, then that's fine. Fine. So let's say you're on damage 5, you play Irvine onto the field, put him in the break zone, deal 9k to something. He comes back in, put him in the break zone again, deal 9k to something else. So it's just like with Gilgamesh. Obviously, he is only a little 5k forward, so if your opponent doesn't have any forwards to block with, then obviously giving him haste will be nice as well, so he can attack, and then he can break or deal 9k twice to something if you wanted. Cloud. So Dull, put one category 7 forward into the break zone, search for one forward that costs 1 CP more than the forward put into the break zone, and play it onto the field. You can only use this ability during your main phase. So obviously Cloud will put something into the break zone. If you use Ovelia's ability on it, and that would mean that that forward can come back in, and then the forward that Cloud has picked will also enter as well. So provided the forward you're bringing into the field isn't the same name as the one leaving the field, you'll be fine. So let's say you got rid of, I don't know, Tifa, 5-cost Tifa, and he brought in 6-cost anything else. Tifa then can re-enter, and you're good to go. You haven't lost your Tifa, and obviously it does re-enter Dull, so you have to be careful of that, but this combined is horrible. Now, 7 doesn't have a huge amount of water support, so it's a bit weird, but Earth is multi-element, and getting water out won't be that hard for Earth, so even if Ovelia is the only real water card you're running, it's probably still worth it. Len! When Len forms a party with card name Yuna and attacks, you may search for one summon and cast it without paying the cost. If you do not cast it, put the summon to the break zone. If you cast a summon of cost 5 or more with this ability, put Len into the break zone. Now, if you use Ovelia, so you could effectively, if you've got a Yuna that's already been there from the previous turn, you play Len onto the field, use Ovelia's S ability to give Len haste. They can then party attack, and then you choose, it doesn't matter what cost summon. Say you go for Raiden and you remove something, break something else. Len gets put into the break zone. That sucks, but she'll come back in because of Ovelia's S ability. And you've still got the attack with the Yuna happening as well, so that's just fantastic. If you were to use the OPUS XII Yuna as well, so you would be dealing minus 8k to something, you know, there's plenty of ways to just destroy so many forwards with this. Cloud. Obviously, Cloud has his own re-entry ability, but this basically just means that you don't have to sack off 10 cards from your deck to be able to re-enter him. Yeah, they don't really have much more to say about it than that. Just good pairing, really. Ishtola. So, being able to, if your opponent, I don't know, does something horrible, like they play Shantoto, you could, in response, use Ovelia on your Ishtola, let that resolve, then put Ishtola into the break zone. So choose one auto ability, cancel it, and then Ishtola comes back, and you've got her there for another trigger. White Tigerless Economy, similar sort of thing, so your opponent casts a summon, you then in response use Ovelia on White Tigerless Sea, and then once that's resolved, you put White Tiger into the break zone, your opponent has to pay 3, or the summon gets cancelled, and then White Tiger comes back in anyway, so it's all fine. Fairy, choose one forward, activate it, draw one card. So one of the great things about this is that obviously her re-entry ability is great, but if you've got no cards to use her on, or no forwards really, then it kind of sucks. So being able to activate a forward so it can block, and then use Ovelia's, Ovelia's, you can tell I'm getting excited, sorry. It's nice to have a really good FFT card, you know, I love Final Fantasy Tactics. But yeah, being able to use Fairy to reactivate a forward, to then be able to make it block, and use Ovelia's S to then flicker it back in is really, really useful. So just having that Fairy to hand, and again, Fairy's an FFT character, FFT card, sorry. So yeah, it's thematic. Right, Cid Randell FFTA. If you control a card named Remedy, Cid Randell gains plus 2,000 power. No one cares about that. Opposing forwards entering the field will not trigger any auto abilities. This applies to their own abilities and abilities triggered by your opponent's forward entering their field. So it basically means when, I don't know, when Forza enters the field, his damage trigger won't apply, but also something else. Yeah, it also means if there's another forward in the field that has an ability trigger from another forward entering the field, that ability won't trigger either. So Dorgan, when a backup enters your field, choose one forward your opponent controls, remove from the game as long as Dorgan's on the field. Basically, with Cid Randell and Dorgan there, it means that if Dorgan does kick the bucket, you don't have to worry about re-entry effects from the forwards removed by Dorgan, because Cid Randell will stop them from happening. Lightning. When Lightning enters the field, choose up to 2 forwards your opponent controls, or forwards of your break zone, remove them from the game, and then when Lightning leaves the field, return each card removed from Lightning's ability to its owner's hand. So similar sort of thing as Dorgan. When she's there, she removes the 2 forwards your opponent controls, and you know, if you're just making way just to be able to deal a couple of points damage, that's fantastic. But ultimately, when Lightning kicks the bucket, if they do re-enter, Cid Randell's there, no entry effects, it's fine. White Tiger, let's see, Kunmi. So really, this is all about the summon cost payment as well. You want to be able to protect Cid Randell, but not just that. It's Cid Randell stops all entry effects from forwards. Doesn't stop entry effects from backups, which is a shame. But you know, being able, if your opponents don't have the ability to use entry effects from their forwards, they're going to probably start relying on their summons. So stopping them from being able to use their summons as well will be essential. And similarly, if they can't have entry effects, they're probably going to want to start using their activated abilities. So being able to cancel their action abilities through Porum, or you know, other things like Leviathan will be super useful. And finally, Tama. So Tama, it doesn't have to be Tama, but just a way to cheat Cid Randell into your deck, even if you're not ice at all. Just having Cid Randell there to stop any entry effects can just completely shut down a deck. Cid Randell is like the Opus II Emperor. It just stops anything your opponent can do from entry effects, and entry effects are key. They are vital in a lot of decks right now. There are some decks that maybe don't run a lot of summons. They've got a lot of entry effects, so you know, maybe a lot of monster decks. So being able to stop that, if you're just mono fire, for example, you've got the little ice generating Moogle, or Tama. I mean, Tama really is Earth, and Earth has got multi-element, or multi-color, sorry. So you don't really have to refer to Tama, but I just love Tama, so I had to feature it. But yeah, being able to fit Cid Randell into just any mono deck can just completely stop your opponents in their tracks. Scarmiglione. I go with Scarmiglione, I think it sounds cooler. So back attack, first strike, and when Scarmiglione enters the field, choose one forward. During this turn, if it's dealt damage, double the damage instead. I love this card. I mean, I love back attacks anyway. That combat tricks are fun, right? But the first strike, it basically means that if you were to play Scarmiglione, he would then be able to deal 6k to the forward he chooses. But that's not really what I care about. So Shantoto, you play Shantoto onto the field. Scarmiglione onto the field, you choose Shantoto, and then you can deal some damage to Shantoto, that gets doubled and then reflected across the field. Now obviously Scarmiglione's going to kick the bucket for this, but realistically that's probably fine. It's all part of the plan anyway. So Bomb, for example, you pay 1 fire, and then Bomb gains, put Bomb into the break zone, deal 4,000 damage to all forwards. You can only use the ability once per turn. So you play Scarmiglione onto field, you choose your Shantoto, you then put Bomb into the break zone. Bomb will deal 8k to Shantoto and then 4k to your opponent's board. That is a 12k board wipe for playing Scarmiglione to the field and paying 1 fire for Bomb and putting that into the break zone as well. I mean, that's just great. That's fantastic. Again, you are going to be losing your Scarmiglione, and Scarmiglione will be removed from game. Actually, no, because the Bomb will trigger first, and that will be what kills Scarmiglione, so he won't even be removed. So if you've got things like Kusith, you can get him back to hand as well. But yeah, 12k board wipe for not paying too much. Similarly, you can also use this Bomb as well. So put Bomb into the break zone, choose one forward, deal it 3,000 damage, and deal 2,000 damage to all the forward opponent controls. Obviously, you choose Shantoto to deal her 6k, and then 2k to everything else. So it's an 8k board wipe, not quite as devastating. You don't have to pay as much, but still works. Gilgamesh. So obviously you can attack with Gilgamesh and then bring Scarmiglione in, and it then means if your opponent's got, say, a 10k forward, or maybe they've just buffed a forward, or they can buff a forward so that it can block Gilgamesh, it means that when Scarmiglione enters, Gilgamesh then will deal 18k to a forward, or maybe you can combo it into some other thing as well. So let's say, again, they've got a big forward, you could Scarmiglione and then use Hecatonchia, so Gilgamesh will double the damage instead. Or, sorry, Scarmiglione will double the damage, and the damage it would receive would be doubled. Obviously, you'd probably be sacking off your Gilgamesh at that point, but, you know, it's a nice way to be able to just cheat in Scarmiglione. Jake. So, obviously, you play Jake onto the field, Scarmiglione can double the damage to something, but Scarmiglione will also gain plus 4,000 power, and as his first strike, if, say, your opponent's attacked with something, you play Scarmiglione in the back attack, that then will deal plus 7 and, or, sorry, plus 4, so he'll be a 7, and he'll actually deal 14 to something. So, he can reliably block a lot of things if you've got Jake on the field. And Megissa as well, so maybe you've got a lot of fire chip damage, but you can't quite get to that 4,000 damage to make Megissa trigger. Then you can play Scarmiglione to then play something else to deal what would have been 2k to Megissa, but then becomes 4k. Obviously you need to be careful because 3,000 becomes 6,000, and then horribly 4,000 becomes 8,000. I'm sure you guys can do math. But yeah, you just need to be careful with this, but if you do need to trigger Megissa, then Scarmiglione might be an easier way of having that happen. Lightning. I love this card. There's not a huge amount of combos with it that in this video anyway, but I just think she's fantastic. So she is a 7 CP 9k forward. When Lightning enters the field, choose up to 2 forwards your opponent controls or forwards in your break zone. Remove them from the game. When Lightning leaves the field, return each card removed by Lightning's ability to its owner's hand. So it's going to need a bit of explanation here. You can actually pick one forward from your break zone and one forward on your opponent's field, and they both get removed and then come back to your and your opponent's hand. So you can do 1 and 1. But, and this is where things get a bit weird and janky. So if Lightning enters the field, her ability will stack. If you can then, on the stack, remove or get Lightning to leave the field, then her leave the field ability will stack. So let's say you choose 2 of your opponent's forwards, and she enters the field, you choose 2 of your opponent's forwards, and then on the stack, you bounce Lightning back to your hand. Her leave the field ability will then stack. Resolution will happen. Her leave the field ability will trigger. No cards have been removed at this point, so nothing happens. Then her entry effect will resolve and remove the 2 forwards, and then those 2 forwards are just gone. They are removed. It doesn't matter if Lightning comes back into the field and then leaves again, anything like that. Lightning's removed them for good. So let's see how we can abuse this, shall we? Magic Pot! Of course Magic Pot! Why wouldn't you use Magic Pot? So you can use Magic Pot just to put Lightning into the breaks. And obviously Magic Pot enters the field dull, so you can't play Magic Pot and then Lightning and use it. So you have to make sure that the Magic Pot has been down for a turn, or you have a way of reactivating Magic Pot at least. But yeah, you play Lightning onto the field, you choose 2 of your opponent's forwards, and you can just remove them. You will choose 2 of your opponent's forwards. You then, on the stack, choose Magic Pot to put Lightning into the break zone. You can then go search yourself another Lightning, play it onto the field, and then when all the resolution happens, Lightning's leave the field ability will trigger, and then her entry effect will trigger, which will then remove the 2 forwards. So you can use Magic Pot alongside this Lightning, for example, which when she enters the field, you can search up to 2 card named Odin and add them to your hand. So not only are you still getting a forward, and you've removed 2 of your opponent's forwards, and they are removed, but you also get 2 cards to hand, 2 Odins no less, which means that you will then be able to get, that recurs the cost of Lightning, but also those cards are pretty powerful and can probably break one of your opponent's forwards as well, if there are any left and you need to get rid of them. Then there's also the other Lightning as well, so maybe you've just removed the 2 forwards that were in the way, and now you can haste on through. Une. So you can flicker her as well, and because Lightning's text is when Lightning leaves the field, it means that, when she leaves the field. So Une will flicker her, which removes from game and then replays into the field. So you would actually get so you play Lightning onto the field, You then, on the stack, cast a summon, which will then trigger Une. Une will, when we go to resolve, Une will resolve. That will flicker lightning. So her leave the field ability will resolve, and her entry effect will, her leave the field ability will stack, and then her re-entry ability will stack as well. Now you get to pick 2 forwards to remove them. Now, when loading into the field, choose up to 2 forwards. So you don't have to pick any. You can pick 0, technically. You can also remove 2 forwards from your break zone as well, which might be worth it. But then, yeah, you just pick whatever on the entry ability. Probably at this point, if your opponent doesn't have any more forwards, you want to pick forwards in your break zone. And then her, her entry effect will have resolved, and then her, oh, that's her second entry effect anyway. Then her leave the field ability will resolve. Now, because she has re-entered, that is a different lightning. So even though you have technically removed 2 cards from the game from her second entry effect, when she tries to put those cards back to hand, they're technically tied to that card named Lightning. No cards have been removed yet, because you've got first entry effect, summon, Une trigger, which will then have resolved. Then you've got leave the field, then entry effect again. Even though this entry effect has resolved, this entry effect has no binding whatsoever to this leave the field effect. So even though you've removed here, this does not make them return to hand. And then, yeah, so basically you get to remove 2 things, and then leave the field effect, nothing happens, and then the summon would resolve as well, and then you have the original just remove 2. Sorry, I know it's a bit of it can be a bit confusing, but basically all you have to remember is the fact that once Lightning leaves the field and then re-enters, that is a different card named Lightning. Same card, like physically the same card, but she is a different card in respect of the rulings of the game. And Scholar as well, so you could literally just play Lightning onto the field, choose 2 forward opponent controls, crack your Scholar to put Lightning back into hand, and just like I've said before, the leave the field ability will resolve, no cards have been removed, then the enter the field ability will resolve, you get to remove 2 forwards. Now obviously you are breaking a backup and, you know, paying 7 for Lightning, but that's cheaper than a Raiden. Now obviously Raiden doesn't make you break a backup, but still, it's not bad. Paying 7 and breaking a backup to remove 2 forwards permanently is really, really good. And finally, Rubicante. So he's a 2 CP 5k forward. When Rubicante is put from the field into the break zone, choose 1 forward opponent controls and deal it damage equal to Rubicante's power. At damage 3, Rubicante gains plus 3000 power. So he's pretty good. I think he's a good Archfiend, and he doesn't have an entry effect, so that means good old Opus XIII Golbez can play him onto the field. Amaranth. So Dahl put 1 forward into the break zone, choose 1 forward, deal it damage equal to the power of the forward put into the break zone. So this basically means you can get 2 triggers of the same effect, effectively. Obviously it's better at damage 3 because Rubicante will be a 8k forward. If you have Lebro down as well, he'll be 9k, which is even better, and it means that by using Amaranth with Rubicante, you effectively get 2 9k pings on whatever you want. Phoenix. So choose up to 1 forward or cost 2 or less in your break zone, play it onto the field, deal 2000 damage to all the forwards opponent controls. This is good because obviously Rubicante could block something, be put into the break zone, then he would deal his damage. You can then cast Phoenix. If Rubicante leaving the field and blocking didn't kill something, then hopefully the Phoenix trigger will be enough to kill it. And then Rubicante re-enters, and he re-enters just standard active, so then you can again block, and hopefully him blocking, if that alone the power enough isn't to kill, if he leaves the field again, you can then kill something else. And what's good to note is the fact that Rubicante, when he leaves the field, he doesn't have to deal the damage to the thing he's blocked, it can be something else as well, so you could finish off something that had previously attacked. Yeah, it's also worth noting you can use this with Jake as well. So, yeah, Jake's in the field, use Phoenix to re-enter him. He would then be a 9k. If you're on damage 3, he will be a 12k, which is pretty good. Yeah, sorry, I'm just doing my math in my head, just make sure I got that right. Yeah, but 12k. And then he leaves the field if he blocks and dies to something, and then he'll deal 12k to something because that's the way it works. If he leaves the field, the damage resolution or the ability will check what his power was as he left the field. So that'll be 12k. Kefka, remember this guy? So Dahl, choose 1 forward you control, it gains plus 5000 power. So even if you're not at damage 3, he'll become a 10k forward. He leaves the field for whatever reason, so you could combo this into, I don't know, a Famfrit. You can then deal 10k to something. That's really good. If you're at damage 3, it'll be 13. again, pretty good. Yeah, sorry, I'm being dense as well. Obviously, you get to the end of your turn, and then Kefka will break Rubicante as well, to doy. At which point, you know, Rubicante will still be a 10k forward at the very least, and that will mean that you get to break something. Well, I say break something. You get to deal 10k something, which is probably enough to break something. Magic Pot. Of course, Magic Pot. I love this card. I try to feature these cards as much as I can. So, Magic Pot, you put them in the breaks, and you bring another Rubicante. There's only 2 others at the moment, so you could bring another one of this Rubicante, but again, you could have tied this in with a Kefka play, or just he could be an 8k, you deal 8k to something, you bring another Rubicante, and do whatever you want to do. Cool. There we have it, folks. Make sure to like the video and subscribe if you do enjoy my videos. I mentioned it in my Opus 13 box opening. I'm going to be doing, I've got a couple of other video ideas in the pipeline as well. One will be archetypes, so I'll be talking about different deck archetypes that are on the game and what each Opus brings to them. So obviously I'm going to start with Chocobos, but not just Chocobos, things like Warriors as well, so something that isn't as heavily supported, but still has some support there. Engineers, you know, as an archetype nobody knew they wanted, but now it's a thing, so yeah. And then obviously there is the behind the card videos, which is just kind of talking about the cards and how they tie into the characters from the games, and not just the characters but the events as well. So maybe 2 cards interacting is meant to represent a particular event in the games that they're from. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe like I said before, and I'll see you guys in the next video.